A common consideration when people are trying to buy a property is whether they should buy a house or a flat. On one side, people think that buying a house is the best option because you have an asset that will increase in value over time, and it also gives you the potential to create value. But on the other side, you might think that buying a flat is a better option because it's cheaper and it also gets you onto the property ladder quicker. I'm going to be talking about the key financial implications of buying a house or a flat, the key things that you need to consider before buying, and finally I'll also be covering one important point regardless of what type of property I'm buying, which is how can we create potential value to maximize the return on our investment. If you're new to the channel, I'm Monty. I'm a central London boutique property developer. We develop some of the best houses for the London market, and I've also got 20 years agency experience with offices in London, Singapore and Malaysia. And this video is part of a series of real estate investment videos on my channel. If you're buying a house, typically it's going to be freehold. This means the actual house and also any external space, which could include the front and rear gardens. You own the freehold outright until you decide to sell, but one really important factor is that you've also got the potential to create value. This could be done by having an extension in the ground floor or actually going into the loft and creating extra space in the main house. This is all subject to planning, so you've got to be up to date with the local policies and guidelines in the area. If you're buying a flat, these would typically be leasehold, which means that you own the internal space for your apartment. However, you've also got communal areas that you share with other residents that could include lift lobbies, an entrance with a concierge and any external space which is owned by somebody else. The person that owns the external spaces is called the freeholder, and what they will do, they will charge you a service charge for the use of those spaces. What we've seen over the course of the last 15 years in the London property arena is new developments which are getting more and more luxurious with more and more facilities, which means that the service charge is increasing and getting high. You also have share of freehold, and here's an example of one of our developments, which is a grade 2 listed house in Regent's Park. Originally there were 4 flats within the main house. We combined one of the units into a larger unit and reduced the number to 3. We owned the freehold. However, when we sold the units, we offered each of the buyers a share of the freehold. What this means is they now own the property and they also are co-owners of the land and the external space that this property sits on. Share of freehold is also a potential benefit when it comes to the resale, and a lot of buyers, they prefer share of freehold as opposed to being tied into leasehold properties where they've got limited control. Another benefit with the share of freehold, for example, on the ground floor we could potentially extend into the garden. Now you would have to go for the planning permission and also get approval from the other residents within the building. Let's look at what you need to consider when buying as an investment and you want to make money. Overseas investors in particular tend to go for flats as opposed to houses because they think that the entry is cheaper and also the gross yields are higher. They also believe that old London houses come with problems, whereas the new condominium style developments are a more modern concept. They also have security and it's a better, safer, hassle-free solution, which is not always the case. By gross yields, we mean the income that you generate through rent versus your expenses. The problem here is that the gross yields can be deceiving because you also have to take into consideration the extra expenses when it comes to owning leasehold properties, which could include number 1, service charge, and number 2, what used to be a peppercorn, ground rent. Let me explain. Let's start off with the ground rent. If you remember, owning a leasehold property means that you own the property for a set number of years, but you also have to share the common areas with other residents and have to pay for the land and for the areas that your property sits on. This is where the owners, who are the freeholders, will charge you a ground rent. Many years ago, this rent was called a peppercorn rent because it was such a small amount, and on average it was around £50 to £100 per year. These days, some leaseholders are paying up to £500 and more for their ground rent, which can also increase depending on your lease terms. That's an increase of about 100%. Number two would be service charge. And if you remember, when it comes to leasehold properties, you own the flat, but what you don't own is the communal areas, which could be the entrance, a concierge facility, it could be communal gardens and other spaces within the development. Now, what's quite important to note here is in central London, in some of the old period properties that have got multiple apartments with no facilities, the service charge could range between £2,000 and £5,000 per annum. However, what we've seen in the last decade is how developments have become more modern, more of a lifestyle concept, and the facilities that they offer quite often include cinema rooms, office spaces, communal gardens, sky gardens, roof terraces, and facilities like swimming pools and gyms and so on. All of these facilities have got a cost implication for the leaseholders, and instead of having the £2,000 and £5,000 per annum, we've got a development like 375 Kensington High Street, which has a service charge of around £10,000 for a one-bedroom flat and £20,000 and £30,000 for larger units. If we also look at the regeneration location of 9 Elms, we've got Embassy Gardens with the sky pool in the air, which looks absolutely fantastic, but the service charge for a one-bedroom flat is about £15,000 to £20,000 per year, which has to be taken into consideration when you're looking to calculate your net yield after expenses. On the flip side, you've got houses where you as freeholders own title absolute. You've got no leasehold service charge to pay, you've got no ground rents, and you are the actual landlords and in full control. You also have autonomy over maintaining the property and having any repairs or dilapidations carried out using contractors of your choice, as opposed to having them stipulated upon you by the freeholders of some of these condominium developments. So when it comes to these high-end luxury apartments, a two-bed would typically start at £1 million, and in order for you to get a 5% yield, that's a gross yield, you've got to try and get £1,000 per week. You buy for £1 million, you rent for £1,000, gives you 5%. Actually, it's a little bit more. If you buy for £2 million, your rental per week should be £2,000 per week, and once again, if it's £3 million, it's £3,000 per week. That's an easy formula that I use to work out what we call a 5.2% gross yield. When it comes to houses, you could buy properties in certain locations cheaper than the 1.5 or £1 million price tag. So I'll give you an example. We've got a location called Ealing. You could buy a 4-bedroom house in this location for circa £800,000, and you could comfortably let it out for the equivalent of a realistic £800 per week without having the extra charges in place, which is a high service charge and ground rent, which is going to increase your overall net yield. When you own a flat, you're responsible for the inside of the property, and it's the freeholder's responsibility for anything external. That could include the communal hallways, the lift, which could be quite expensive, underground car parks, it could be the roof terrace, it could be the cinema room, and there's various other communal spaces. That is all part of the freeholder's responsibility, and they will decide on which contractors they will use. There's also the upgrade issues within these apartment blocks. They could include the new roof and the new windows, and the cost of this could be quite significant, and each leaseholder must contribute a certain amount for the upgrade of these items. There's also one really important thing to note here. We had a fire in London in a council block which was called the Grenfell fire, which you may have heard of, and that meant that a lot of these developments had to have what we call their cladding replaced so that it was a fire resistant cladding and it was safe. There were two problems here. One is, up until this cladding was changed and approved, the owners could not sell their properties, and subsequently, since the works have been done, they may have had to contribute a certain amount for the replacement of that cladding. These are the costs that you have to consider with leasehold properties when it comes to your financial calculations and working out what your gross yields will be. Another consideration would be the ownership period. With freehold houses, you own title absolute. That means it's yours, you own it forever or until you decide to sell. With leasehold properties, they usually come with a lease of 125 years, and with every year that passes, that clock starts ticking and the lease starts to go down. Now, it doesn't seem to be a problem up until you get to about 70 years, and this is where the banks come into play on the resale, and they don't like to lend on what we call a short lease of 70 years and below. There's good news. Legislation has recently changed, and in the past you had to own a property for a minimum of 2 years before you could apply for a lease extension. However, that can now be done almost immediately. With some new builds, developers have been created and have offered a triple 9-year lease, which makes the owners feel as though they own title absolute, but there's still two catches. One is the ground rent and the second would be the service charge. Another consideration would be alterations, which will help you increase value. Whether you're buying a house or a flat, ideally what you want to see is capital appreciation, and the rule of thumb is a property's price should double every 10 years. You can accelerate this period quite significantly by creating value. This could be creating additional space, going into the loft, doing a full internal refurbishment and making enhancements to the property. It's much easier to do this with a freehold house where you have control, as long as you have the approval and you fit within the policy of the local authority. However, with leasehold properties, there's extra hurdles because you have to get the freeholder's consent to make sometimes the smallest of changes. The freeholder may also have charges for the application and the approval, and they may also ask you for a lump sum payment for their approval, which makes your refurbishment costs even higher. Leasehold apartments could also have restrictions when it comes to renting and the choice of tenants. So what we've got is we've got long-term tenants which are on an assured short hold tenancy, renting for a minimum of 6 months and a year and 2 years. We also have corporate lets as well, which are long-term. But there is one very lucrative market, which is the short let market. This could be Airbnb or holiday homes. And the problem that you find with most condominium style developments is that their lease will stipulate that you're not allowed to let on a short let or holiday let basis, which means you miss out on Airbnb and short let apartments. With freehold houses, this is not the case, because once again you've got title absolute and you are the freeholder and you have got free control of whoever you want to rent that property to, and maximize the return on your investment and increase your gross and net yield. Additionally, with freehold houses, the creating of value add is what sets them apart from apartment blocks for me. Let me give you an example. Here is a 3-bedroom house that we purchased last year for £1.1 million, including the stamp duty. We've spent circa £400,000 on this, and we've created a new loft. We've got a ground floor side extension. You can see this lovely open plan kitchen and lounge that looks onto the garden. We've got a bespoke kitchen here. As we go upstairs, we've got a master bedroom. We've got this amazing bathroom, which is an ensuite, and then we've got a further 2 bedrooms in the loft. Now the loft was previously the roof space. We've got this green bedroom and we've got this pink bedroom. It's one's for a boy, one's for a girl, based on our buyer profile. We've got fitted wardrobes, and we've finished this off to an amazing standard, and we had a resale on this house for £1.8 million. And what's really important here is we put the property onto the market on the Friday, we had a viewing on the Saturday, and we achieved a record price on a Monday, and the buyers were absolutely thrilled that they found this home and they're going to be in there for the next 7 to 10 years. The main difference between this and apartments is we've got low supply and high demand for family homes, and when it comes to mass volume developments, there is an oversupply because there's more units, and there's low demand because there's no local buyers that have got the affordability, or they want to buy 2-bedroom apartments for £1 million plus, and in some of these developments they're even higher than the £2 million point for a 2-bedroom flat. Let's move on to some other factors for you as buyers and investors need to consider as part of your investment and purchase process. Point number 1, I would recommend that you buy in a location that you want to live in, and what I would call an aspirational location for other people to want to live there too. So in central London, we've got high-end locations like Notting Hill, Primrose Hill, Queen's Park, St John's Wood, Belsize Park, Hampstead, and these are just to name a few. We've got trendy locations like Highbury and Islington, Angel, Old Street, Farringdon, Clerkenwell and Camden Town too. And then we've got trendy hotspots in East London, which are like Hackney, Shoreditch, Stoke, Newington, and south of the river we're looking at areas like Putney and Chiswick. These are all aspirational locations where there is a demographic change and there's high demand from new locals that want to move into the area. Number 2 would be the style of property. When it comes to houses, we've got Georgian, Victorian and Edwardian houses. These are popular houses in hotspot locations that I've just mentioned. And then you've got new build developments which are modern and overpriced, and they're not in aspirational locations, they're in new regentrification or new regeneration locations. Whereas you've got other areas like St John's Wood and Hampstead and even Knightsbridge and Kensington, that what we have is old mansion blocks or period apartment blocks where I would say there is more appeal, less service charge, and the rents are higher with a higher occupancy rate because they are what we call aspirational locations to live, and the buildings have charm and character. And lastly, when it comes to capital appreciation, that would also come from the regeneration plans of a specific location. So try and do your research in terms of any regeneration that's going to be coming into the local area. This could be billions of pounds coming into a location. So we've seen that with King's Cross over the last 25 years, which has seen a great appreciation with the property values there. And another location that's up and coming as a regeneration location is a part of North London where it's called Tottenham, and we've seen the Tottenham Stadium, football stadium, be redeveloped, but there's also a location there called Meridian Water. This is an area where we can buy houses, or you could buy houses about 2 or 3 years ago, freehold houses, Victorian houses, for around £400,000 to £500,000, and they make a great rental investment with the potential to add value and increase your capital appreciation much faster too. So you've got to have your ears to the ground, you've got to know what your market is, you've got to know what you're looking for. And with that said, I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. I sincerely hope that you've picked up some knowledge, some tips along the way. If you've got any comments, please put them into the section below and I'll make sure that I try and answer. And most importantly, if you like this video, please make sure you share, like and subscribe, because it helps the algorithm and it also motivates me to do more videos like this for viewers like you. Until next time, Monty Nawaz,